Hey, everyone. Welcome back in. Brand new episode of Cherry Heat Check lined up for you today. This is an unofficial New Mexico Lobos basketball podcast. Hope everyone's having a great Monday, this February 9th. I'm Ricky Thompson, your host for the show today, as the Lobos drop their second in a row at home in conference play here, 91-90 to Boise State. I will tell you what that means for the bigger picture look for the Lobos resume and break down what we saw in this game as Luke hopped one of the most memorable performances in a Lobo jersey in some time, getting his career high in points. But Lobo defense, again, not with their strongest performance, and their defensive woes kind of continue here. I'll tell you what I think about that. But the majority of the show, I'll be focusing on what lies ahead for New Mexico as they will go to Phoenix to face a good GCU team this Wednesday, the 12th, as New Mexico faces the GCU Lopes for the second time this season in conference play. I will be joined by Brennan Williams of Go Lopes Radio. He independently covers GCU basketball, does a fantastic job, is credentialed by the media there, was at Mountain West Media Day, so has a great overall view of the conference and knows a lot about GCU basketball. So looking forward to breaking down that game with you all and with Brennan. To start the show here, taking a look at the overall Mountain West Conference standings after this weekend's games. Utah State, San Diego State still set up at the top at 11-2 overall. New Mexico and Nevada sit at second place at 9-4, trailing them by half a game. Grand Canyon at 8-4, and Boise State now crawling up over 500 in conference play at 7-6 after that win over New Mexico on Saturday, where they held on down the stretch there to win 91-90. Lobos deploying their three-point happy defense, forcing the Boise State Broncos to shoot 35 three-pointers. Boise State answering the call, making 15 from downtown, shooting 43% from deep in the game, and that really keeping them a little bit ahead of the Lobos all night. Besides their awesome work at the foul stripe, 26 of 27 from Boise, Lobos continued to send the Broncos to the foul line down the stretch, and that equaled automatic points. Lobos, again, having opportunities in this close game, much like they did against San Diego State in Viejas, which was a close one there as well, but New Mexico not able to come out on top. Couple of plays down the stretch for me really made me scratch my head as far as the outcome of the game, and I'll get into those a little later here. But just looking purely at the stats, New Mexico forcing 10 turnovers, but really not able to get those in a fashion that led to any big runs and allowed them to pull away in the game. 19 assists, though, for the Lobos on those 32 makes. Offense really looking better this game than it did against Utah State a few games before. And offensively, when you score 90 points for New Mexico, you should expect to win based on the defense they've played this year. But 15 three-pointers, just too much to overcome for New Mexico. Luke hopped, having one of the greatest games I can remember in some time in the pit. 30 points for the senior, his career high. He's the transfer out of Division II Point Loma in San Diego area. He finishes 11 of 17 from the field, 3 of 4 from deep, including a miracle shot where he literally flicked it up at the rim with time running out on the shot clock, and he swished it, followed by a series of drives in the second half where he was getting banged to the floor, finding a way to score, also chipping in with 4 assists, and of course his defensive effort. The only real problem I had with Hopt is the final 2 fouls that were called against him. He has to try to be smarter in those situations and not pick up those fouls that are 35 feet away from the basket. I know he's fighting over picks. I know he's trying to cut off the drive, but they couldn't afford to lose him at that point in the game. And what it also did was send a red hot free throw shooting team of Boise back to the line, and that was like automatic points. Jake Hall finishing with 19 to go along with Hop's 30. Hall playing much better than he did in Boise a couple weeks ago, finishing 4 of 10 from deep, but only chipping in with 1 rebound and 0 assists for Hall. Also, not his best defensive effort, as Dylan Andrews, Neto, Carmichael were really having their way on offense all night. Dayton Albury, other backcourt mate, he finishing with 9 points, 4 rebounds. Not a real big impact on this game, especially on the defensive end where he has been causing that great disruption. Sorry, I'm losing my voice here. Not a lot coming out of Albury as far as impact in this one. Bojan, double-double machine most of the time, not to be in this one. 7 points, 9 rebounds, 3 of 7 from the field, as his impact really limited in this game. Final starter in this one was Antonio Chol. He's starting off the game doing what I think myself and others want to see him do, of putting his head down and going to the rack. He did do that early, did not do it consistently throughout the game, only scoring 4 points to go along with 1 rebound. And he was really not in at the end of the game until Hop fouled out. Olin opting to go with Tanet and the other starters instead of Chol about the final 3 or 4 minutes before Hop fouled out. JT Rock really limited in his minutes and impact in this one. 9 minutes, 5 points, 3 rebounds. One of the best defenders on the Lobo team, but not really playing enough minutes at this point to be impactful out there. And when he is playing, it seems like he's kind of plateaued from where he was a few weeks ago, where I thought he would continue his growth, kind of leveling out now as we have moved halfway through conference play. To Javis Miller, 18 minutes, only 1 of 6 from the field, 0 of 3 from deep, 2 points, not really adding much for New Mexico. And it does not sound like injured Lobo Chris Howell will be returning anytime soon. Based on the question Jeff Grammer of the Albuquerque Journal asked Eric Olin, it sounds like Chris Howell is still rehabbing, and his rehab is not really gone according to timeline or plan right now. So still no victory in sight of overcoming that injury. New Mexico really limited in the players they have, and that can be effective right now. But Dylan Andrews for Boise State, winning Conference Player of the Week award today. Very deserving. 33 points in this game, 10 of 10 at the foul line. And the transfer from UCLA now seems like he is finally comfortable in this Leon Rice offense. His confidence at an all-time high. Of course, 5 3-pointers. And other transfer from Georgetown, the big man, Drew Fielder, 5 of 10 from deep as well for 18 points, 5 rebounds. And Boise State was missing their glue guy in RJ Keene, senior, who was out with an illness, but Pearson Carmichael stepping up nicely in this game. The sophomore, 5 of 10 from the field, 16 points, 8 rebounds, showing that he was able to deliver the physicalness, blows, take them from bullion and finish, and then solid defense as well. So too much offense from Boise as they shot lights out. New Mexico defense scratching their head for the 3rd straight game, giving up variety of jump shots and open looks to shooters during that 3-game stretch. Coach Olin in the presser today after practice really saying it was really only a matter of time, I think, till some of these games occurred based on the strategy that they're deploying, making teams shoot those threes. And if the opposing team is hot, we're seeing what really happens. San Jose State really hanging in that game, only losing by 10. Utah State, of course, winning by 20 points. And then this one, Boise State, winning by 1 after New Mexico not able to make any type of stops consistently or cause the disruption that we saw earlier in the year. But all is not lost for New Mexico, as they still seem like a outside of the bubble team as far as bracketologists are saying for the NCAA tournament. A series of good opportunities still await. That starts with GCU this coming week. And I will now bring on Brennan Williams of Go Lopes Radio to help me preview this game. GCU coming off a loss to UNLV over the weekend on the road in Vegas, a game they were favored to win. But the Lopes really playing much better basketball since that loss back in the pit by 23 a couple weeks ago. So I will see what Coach Drew and the Lopes have cooked up with Brennan here. All right, we are back to preview this Mountain West matchup. As I've been mentioning, I have a special guest on today. Not finding anyone out there that knows more about the Lopes than Mr. Brennan Williams of Go Lopes Radio. He covers the Lopes independently, is credentialed by the media, puts out written work, podcast, video clips, new tweets every day that teaches me things. So Brennan, thanks for being on the show. How are you? And did you survive the Waste Management Open in Phoenix?
Well, Riggy, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Obviously, kept an eye on your work and, love. I think the big thing has just been, how exciting it's been. The Lobo community has really welcomed GCU in. And I think that's been pretty cool. Obviously, we saw what happened at the pit. It wasn't like, nobody showed up and they were cheering on GCU, right? There's a friendly part of it, but there is a competitive part to it, which makes it awesome. But it's been awesome so far. I did survive the Waste Management Open. We were out there yesterday. It was really fun. I would consider myself more of a golf fan than the other stuff fan. But I mean, it was Chamber of Commerce Day, beautiful weather. Enjoyed some really good golf. Had a cold beverage. It was all great. So, with that being said, that the weekend is now behind us. I would also like to leave the GCU game from Saturday behind us at UNLV. We'll probably talk about that at some point here, I'm guessing. But all eyes now on Wednesday as the Lopes look for a little bit of revenge with the Lobos coming to town.
Sure. And as we look at really what the Lopes have done since they were in Albuquerque, of course, it was a 23-point win for the Lobos where the game kind of got out of hand in the second half. But I guess before we look too much ahead at New Mexico, what has really been the difference in your eyes in some of these games they've won since that New Mexico game? Because, I mean, they beat Utah State, San Diego State back-to-back. They should have won that Nevada game if they would have made a few more free throws, which is a game they'll be kicking themselves over. But for the most part, outside of that UNLV game, they've been playing much better basketball. Has there been something that you could put your finger on that's changed since that New Mexico route?
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me, which I think even rings more true after Saturday, is just the rigors of the Mountain West and how hard it is. And I think there's a little bit of respect that comes from that, right? Like Utah State, they played Nevada, I believe, on Wednesday, late Wednesday night, and then had to come to GCU Arena and play at 12:30 local Mountain time here. And so that, I'm not saying that's an excuse to the reason why GCU won, but, you start to see just how much this stuff kind of adds up over a season, right? Injuries, obviously a big part of that as well. But I think that's the first thing that comes to mind is just the rigors of the Mountain West and GCU's been able to catch teams at the right time. And it's a good reminder. GCU Arena is a really tough place to play as well. And so I think that's the first thing to call out. The second thing when you kind of look at on the court, and it does make Saturday more baffling. And that these are my words. This is Bryce Drew in the post game, was just the kind of lack of physicality. And they've had this a few times this year, which happens when you have a new team. I think maybe New Mexico's experiencing a little bit of that right now. There's just kind of that malaise sometimes that happens. Like these guys still getting to know each other. They improved a ton, especially from some of the early season letdowns they've had. So things are getting a lot better. And I think a lot of those things clicked. Like, the big guy, F.A. Demerol, who, he didn't get to campus till I think like August. He gets a little bit more time. So he's developing literally day by day. Jaden Henley's kind of coming into his own. All these guys were kind of meshing, and it looked really good. They were scoring the ball well in a few of those games, which has kind of been the big kind of bugaboo for this team is offensively. It's not much of a secret. They're just pretty average on that end. And so I think there's been some variance there where they've made some shots, had some guys make some shots, maybe that normally wouldn't. And they were just playing some really good basketball. And I think you mentioned the Nevada game, and I think this will be kind of my final point here. I think the Boise game was really important because that Nevada game, you can kind of go two ways, and you can kind of let it spiral, and you can let it affect a second game, and you can have the malaise, and you can say, well, this, well, that, well, if this didn't happen, or the refs, or this. And I was really impressed by the Boise State win at home. And I get it's at home. Boise was playing a lot better basketball. We know, you guys saw that a little bit the other night. And they just came out and they worked Boise pretty good. And I think that was a massive statement for what this group can be. And I think had Lopes fans really excited. And then, obviously Air Force is, it's an unfortunate topic to talk about. They are really bad. And then the UNLV thing on Saturday was weird. I don't know what it was. It's just, I guess, maybe how some of this stuff goes in the Mountain West. Maybe I saw jokes online like that's a true welcome to the Mountain West moment is when you actually get to lose to UNLV. That's like the true welcome to the Mountain West. So, yeah, I mean, all things considered, I think Mountain West play's gone well. Obviously, the Nevada game you want back in the UNLV game. Maybe Colorado State early on, but they've looked a lot better of late. And, I don't think that's by accident. It's credit to Coach Drew and the staff.
Right. And for anyone that hasn't watched UNLV, they are my guilty pleasure hate watch. Every game, you have no idea what UNLV will do down the stretch. It's one of the most exciting, painful watches you will have this year. So I highly suggest that. But you're hitting on this home atmosphere of GCU, where I think their only home conference loss was against Colorado State, which I think was the first game in conference play.
Yeah.
Since then, they have not lost at home, seats 7,000 to 8,000. And when I see it on TV, it reminds me of the 16th hole at the Waste Management, Brennan.
Yeah.
And I've been there. It looks like an electronic dance party with something going on between each timeout. How much of a benefit is that, and how much of a distraction is that for opposing teams that you've been able to see?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real environment. The thing that you have to call out, too, at the Colorado State game is the students were gone. So, technically, it's kind of unfair to do the what if, but like when students have been on campus, they haven't lost a conference game at home yet. So I think that's a really big thing to point out with that Colorado State game. When students are gone, it just does make for a tougher environment. And so, but yeah, it's legit. It's awesome. It's funny because early on you would notice some games were actually some of the teams that don't really get to experience really good environments actually were like weirdly thriving in it because they loved it and they were amped. And so certain teams have weirdly been able to like harness it and come into GC Arena and play pretty good basketball. But I think what you're seeing in Mountain West play so far with students there is it's just it's a really tough place to play. And I think there's a double-edged sword to this. There's a beautiful ignorance of, I don't want to say like GCU fans, right? They're growing. This is a new thing here, GCU University relative to, think New Mexico, right? Like so many years of history. So there's not this like ebb and flow to the game. I remember when GCU was up at Boise State, they didn't have a ton of fans there, but they were excited at the start and their team played bad and there was no environment. But here's the thing with GCU fans is like, there's a little bit of ignorance. Like a ball will go in after, a whistle. Someone will take a shot like, most players do. And it goes in and the GCU fans cheer. And there's an ignorance to that because they don't really care about the situation. They keep it going all day long. Like they keep it here and they're not going to bring it down. And so I think there's something kind of beautiful about that where you feel like I remember at the Mountain West tournament the last few years I've gone with friends and you feel like the New Mexico Legacy fans, right? They have such a feel for the game. They know when to get involved and stand up, right? And they almost just know. And GCU fans, like they just kind of peak the whole time and they just go all game long. And so It is a little bit crazy. It feels it's loud. There's a ton of loud music. And I think it is a really good college basketball environment. It's different than a lot of environments. A lot of players I think have played it, and fans, other opposing fans have experienced. But it's a fun one for college basketball. It's unique. It's kind of its own thing. It's not like anybody else. And I think I just think it makes for a fun stop on the Mountain West schedule. And I think fans are going to give it back to GCU when they go on the road. I mean, that Utah State away game is going to be terrifying. I think the Herd have that one circled, the student section there. They'll be ready to go, and Utah State fans will. But that's good for basketball. Like, I think we all would prefer those environments. And so, it's the real deal. It's really awesome. And I can imagine, I think Wednesday's going to be really good. I think there's going to be a lot of Lobos fans out in Phoenix. I know there's some that live here. I'm sure some will travel over. I think it's going to be a really good college basketball environment on Wednesday, so I'm really excited for it.
As am I, and I couldn't agree more. Lots of Lobo fans living out there already. Decent drive. But looking at this roster of the Lopes, to me, it was really a complete rebuild, even knowing they did bring back a few players that were under Coach Drew. Most of the impact players coming from elsewhere, really led by Jaden Henley, not having his best game against UNLV, making his living at the line all year. What can you say about Henley? It seems like the past couple of games, he might not be playing his best basketball, where maybe the first 10 games of conference play, he was looking like possibly an all-conference type player, or player of the year candidate even. Has he been consistent, or has he kind of slowed down here a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's a few things to call out of them. First is, it stinks to do this, but the jumper, the 3-point shot just hasn't been good. And he's made them in bunches at times. I think we're at low 20s for a percentage right now, which is not good. He took a bunch on Saturday, and, some ill-advised ones. And at times those have gone in certain games. And I think the second thing to call out, so it is tough when you're not a great 3-point shooter. It just changes what defenses can do. I mean, even you look at a great coach like Coach Olin, like, I'm sure he's got that written down. I'm sure he's going to be ready to kind of navigate that however is needed. And then I think the second thing with him, I was just talking with someone about this, is he's so good though in like informal situations. So if you get him in the half court and the game slowed down and there's like 18 seconds left on the shot clock, if they slowly dribble it up, he's just a lot less effective because the defense is set. They're packing it in, and he's going to end up taking a lot more long twos, some of those step back threes, not catch and shoot threes. But man, when he's in transition, one thing I've noticed is he's so good off of like offensive rebounds. So if we get an offensive rebound, kick it out to him and the defense isn't set, he's so slithery and he can get in there. And so I think with him transitioning maybe out of this half court, pounding the air out of the ball, and he can do a little bit more in transition. He's probably one of the most gifted players in transition. I mean, I'm not going to say he's Donovan Dent from last year. I mean, I know Lobos fans, that was a real treat to watch once Donovan got out in space. But Jaden Henley's really good. When he gets out in space, he's lengthy. You're not going to block his shot. You got to be really, really special to do that. So I think the more he can get in some of those informal situations, I think the better off he's going to be. And I do think there's an additional layer for him that can, kind of get others involved a little bit more, not just playmaking for Jaden Henley playmaking for, player X, player Y. I think that's another thing he could do, but he's really talented. And when he's got it on a night, he can be one of the best players in the conference, and he can single-handedly win a game without a doubt. And so I think, you got to be ready for him, and you kind of get an idea what you get early from him. And, we're going to hope come Wednesday, maybe a little less threes, but a little more getting out in transition.
Right, and I'm joined by Brennan Williams here of Go Lopes Radio, covering all things GCU Lopes basketball. We're talking about Jaden Henley here, one of the top scorers, 17 points a game, and that playmaking you're talking about, almost 3 assists. But I think my understanding was he was brought in more, they thought they could turn him into a primary ball handler. To my viewing knowledge, that has not really played out that way. Can you talk a little bit about Makai Williams and Brian Moore? It looks like Makai Williams has now inserted himself in the starting lineup. Can you just hit on what he's doing? Because I was really impressed with Williams in the first half against New Mexico, and it looks like he's been playing better the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, the guard play's been I don't want to use like the word funny, but it's been pretty finicky, I think would maybe be the word. Like there's just been nights where it clicks and you're talking about that first half with Mekhi Williams. I mean, Mekhi's had 7 or 8 different halves this year where your mind is blown. I mean, he can hit threes off the dribble. He's getting others involved. He's so confident, and it just works. And there's games where he's turned the ball over like a ton, and he just gets the ball kind of taken from him. So it has been for all the guards, honestly, touch and go. Brian Moore was dealing with a hamstring injury. So I think he missed only one game, that Nevada game, and then he came back and was on a little bit of a minutes restriction. Seems to be back now. But, even him, he was shooting the three better. Brian Moore was, but Saturday was just a massive step backwards and the guard play was bad. And their guards got outplayed by UNLV's guards. And I think that's kind of it's like reading that out loud. It's like, what? No way. Like these guys GCU brought in all this talent and you've seen them at different times. And you're saying, how did they get outplayed by, Dre Gibbs, Lawhorn, and some backup guards for UNLV? But the matter of fact, they just did. And so I think that's a point of emphasis moving forward is what does this guard rotation look like? Is Dusty Stromer going to come in off the bench and be able to make threes and be reliable? Can Mekhi Williams, whether he's starting, whether he's coming off the bench, is he, a guy who can initiate the offense and, not turn the ball over? And then obviously, we talked a little bit about Henley and the Brian Moore Jr. So I don't know. There's a lot of things to consider with the guards. And I think that's been a little bit of, I hate to say a problem at times is there is a little bit of, well, we're going to see who's going to pop tonight. But sometimes, if you've got 4 or 5 guys, maybe a guy can only pop for a few minutes and that's all you get for a night, which is kind of what happened in UNLV. And all of a sudden you don't have really good guard play for a night. So again, there's been nights where they've been incredible. The drink mixes and, you got Henley and Mekhi coming off the bench and at times. And so it's worked, but it's been touch and go. And so I think it's going to be a massive point of emphasis. Olin has really good guards over there. We know how he likes to play. He's an efficiency machine. He's not going to fall into other teams' traps. He wants to do what he wants to do. And I think that's going to be a matchup you can kind of watch there is the guard play of New Mexico. You look at Albury, Tannett coming off the bench, as this like spark plug, whatever sort of guy, who kind of just comes in and gets – it's kind of funny to watch. Like he just gets complete freedom and it's really awesome. He had some moments obviously against GCU and then he's had some bad moments, but I think keeping an eye on that guard play is going to be really fascinating on Wednesday in a really good environment and who can kind of, not just make plays for themselves, but like I mentioned earlier, can you make plays for other guys?
Yeah, and guard play is not something the Lobos have defended well over the past 3 games. Against San Jose State, Colby Garland really torched them. Moving on to Utah State, of course, Falsalev, MJ Collins really gave it to him. And then a couple nights ago, Dylan Andrews having his best game of the season. So UNM really struggling right now on actually defending the perimeter, still forcing teams to shoot a lot of threes, but they're starting to make them now. Boise St, not the greatest shooting team, and they make 15 threes over this past weekend. So you never know. This could be the game that GCU warms up because it seems that the Lobos are heating everyone else up from the perimeter as of late. But looking at the guys down inside, I know the guy you're beating the drum for, Nana Owusu-Nane, transfer from Brown as your defensive player of the year in conference. I would agree with you if Mason Falsalev didn't exist. But he would be my second guy in that category. He's averaging almost a double-double, 9 points, almost 9 rebounds. But tell us a little about Nana, what he brings on both ends. I know he's a terrific defender, and I'll switch over to the defensive stats here. But what does Nana do on defense, and then what has he been bringing on offense for those that haven't seen him?
Yeah, so – he was the one guy that stuck out on Saturday, and even Bryce gave him some credit, and I did in my rapid reaction as well. Like he had a Nana game on Saturday. It was like I think 8 or 9 guys played, and there was one guy that actually looked like they were kind of ready to play in the game, and he knew it was on the schedule, and that was Nana. And that's kind of a good summary of who he is, a little bit of a psychopath, a workhorse. I think the big thing with him, when he committed to the Lopes, one thing when I was watching his film, because he sat out last season at Brown, he was hurt. And one thing you notice with him is he's a tweener. So he's kind of 6'8", 6'9". And when you see these tweeners in college basketball, I think they're really special because they've never really had a place, right? Like they've kind of had to figure it out. And they're not like, oh, I'm just a 3-point shooter and I'm this. Like for him to play and be successful, like he's had to guard 7-footers. And well, he's not like a 7-footer, so he's had to guard wings. And so it's like you kind of got to figure out a way to be playable and make yourself good. And I think that's who he is as a player, and what makes him so special is he's just had to kind of find his own path, and he doesn't really have a comp. I mean, I've joked, I want to be clear. We can all remember peak Draymond was incredible as kind of that power forward, free safety, middle linebacker sort of guy on defense, right? Like could guard almost 1 through 5. Nana does a decent impersonation of that. He's so talented. He's so spatially aware. He knows everything that's going on at the floor at all times. He's so aware of assignments and what guys want to do. I think that's another thing that's really clear with him. And so he's always in the right place at the right time. Incredible motor, really good rebounder. That's a big part of defense that, probably doesn't get talked about a lot. Is like, you got to end the possession. I mean, and I think there's some really good offensive rebounding teams in the Mountain West. So having a guy that can kind of end a possession, that happened in UNLV, oddly enough. I don't know what the heck led to that. It just is, again, chalk it up to the chaos of the Mountain West. I don't know why UNLV would all of a sudden become the best offensive rebounding team in the nation on Saturday, but I guess they were. And there was a few possessions where you could literally see Nana just like almost boiling under the basket. And he was like, if someone wants to come get this basketball, they're going to have to come through me. I'm not even going to worry about like anything else in this world. I'm going to grab the basketball and this possession is going to be over because I'm done with it. He did it a few times. So it's just a special motor with him, and offensively, the jumpers coming along, that always changes things. We know that for guys. Like you make threes, you're feeling better. Everything else makes a lot more sense. So he's making some threes. And then on Saturday, he was getting to the basket a little bit more. I've kind of clamored for that a little bit with him. Like, you're lingering out at that 3-point line. Let's get you closer to the basket with, just incredible skills and that he has. And that seems to be happening a little bit. So really special player. I think he's kind of asserting himself as the guy. I think, Henley maybe was that guy earlier in the season, but I think with what Nana brings on the defensive end, what he brings night to night is consistency in his motor. I think we're kind of seeing this team become Nana's team. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, that's like nothing bad against Jaden Henley. I just think, Nana's such a special player with his motor, everything he does on defense. He can guard, multiple guys. He's just so aggressive and physical. And I think that's what makes him so special and has been a big part of GCU's defense that we talked about is trending. You see it on the screen right here, right? Top 20 in the nation. They've been that way for a few weeks now. So I think Nana's just been a really special part of that. And so massive credit to him. And I do think he's the player of the year. I love Falsev. He's been incredible. I thought in the one game, I've watched a few of his games. In the one game against GCU, he does gamble a lot. That's why he does get a lot of steals that way. He's a very talented defender. So I don't want anything with the Utah State fans, guys. I already got, they came after me for a few things already, guys. We're not playing that game. Mason Falsev's incredible. I think he gambles a little bit. And so I would probably give that award to Nana for now, but a few weeks left. So we'll see.
Yeah. And I could go with Nana as well. And I definitely agree with the Draymond Green comparison. I've watched my fair share of Warriors games in person and on TV, obviously being out here in the Bay Area. So a guy that does everything, his 3-point shot is improving. I've seen that as well. So just an exciting player. But the other big man, I believe that starts as Demirel down low, the guy, I believe he's from Turkey, a freshman. What do you expect him to do against Tomislav Boljan, as seems like it should be a good matchup of guys banging and boarding down low?
Yeah, it's funny because in the first matchup, right, Boljan was in foul trouble essentially the whole game. So he had no rhythm. So we really didn't get to see, right, a whole lot of that kind of battle down there. But FA, he's really come along. And I'm going to pull up right now our box score to see how he did in that game. But FA, again, like I mentioned, he comes to campus super late because he was playing in the U19s and, he struggled out of the gate. As you'd kind of imagine, right? It's a physical game here in the States and a lot of adjustments to that. Everything we're hearing in practice is, oh my gosh, he's been incredible. I think he got to games and it's just a different beast. And he was struggling at first. wasn't being super physical. And then he kind of started having a few breakout games. And you started to see these stretches and he's flashing it. And it's just been slowly like more of that, right? Instead of that 4-minute stretch, it's like we're getting 2 of these 4-minute stretches where it's like, oh my gosh, like, wow, okay, like that's a real legit big guy who might be a little ahead of schedule now. And there's been some steps backwards without a doubt, certain games. And I'm looking at the New Mexico game and he was not great. He dealt with some foul trouble. Was not very good. He had a few boards. He was 0 for 4 from the field, 5 boards, and he had 3 fouls. So we didn't really get to see that matchup first time around. So we'll see. Maybe we can get it. But he's trending and playing well, and I think there's still more development for him before the season's over. And I've talked about it. I've joked just this like 2.0, 3.0, 4, whatever this version, like we're getting these different versions of him. I think there's one more maybe evolution he might have in him. And if we can get that version, I think it changes a lot of things for this Lopes team. He's a really special talent. You can see it. I'm sure you've seen him a few times this year where he's had some of those stretches. It's like, oh my gosh, if he could provide that, any sort of consistent basis of that, he'd be really incredible. But, we'll see what we get Wednesday. It's been a little touch and go, but I would expect a big FA game because he's, again, like I said, he's kind of really coming along.
Great. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing his improvement since that last game as well. Seemed like in the second half of that game, and I'll let you go here, Brennan, the pace of the game kind of changed in the second half. There was a handful of turnovers that really led to a lot of New Mexico easy buckets. What do you foresee in this game being some of the make or break points? Will it come down to turnovers? Can GCU make enough threes to hang in it? Because to my surprise, I think KenPom is actually showing UNM as a 1 or 2 point favorite, which I wouldn't really expect in GCU. But what do you think are gonna be the few keys that decide the game?
Well, when I look back at that game and I spent some time, I obviously went through the box score and kind of relived some of that. The big storyline was the refs, and I hate even spending time on it. You probably didn't see what I put out after the game, but it's like, we're not going to sit here and argue the refs. Like the same thing happened, right? GCU then gets a call a week and a half later against San Diego State in a very crucial moment. It ebbs and flows. I didn't like how we saw this a little bit on Saturday. I got to be honest, like a little bit of GCU players kind of like putting their hands up and kind of slow getting back on defense. And everybody was mad. We had another technical on Saturday. I just thought was kind of ill advised at the wrong time. And so I think that's one big thing is just like, do you go back and look at that game and do you trust yourself as GCU to see how you played the first 26 minutes and say you're right there in the game and within reach. And even when you got the double technicals, I think it was only a 9 or 10 point game, kind of you get a stop and you get a bucket, like a lot of things change there. So I think if you're GCU, it's like, do you maybe just throw that part of the game out and say, we can play with these guys? Obviously, now they got to come to our arena. So I think that's one big thing to monitor with GCU is, if stuff's happening. It happened at Saturday at UNLV, and I thought they just I kind of hated the way they responded to a lot of it. I thought it was just kind of, I hate to use the word lame, but like throwing your hands up and getting bothered by it. It's like, you guys are the better team. You're favored in this game. UNLV's down 2 scores, stay the path and go win this basketball game. And it felt like they were really bothered by a lot of that stuff. So I think mentally checking in on this team is going to be a big thing, how they respond. You could flip that and also say the same thing about your Lobos right now, right after the 2 losses. Obviously, they're going to be mad. So I think that's a big storyline. And I think we'll literally get to the first TV timeout and we'll have an idea on both teams. Like we'll literally be able to message and say, we'll have an idea on the Lobos. We'll have an idea on the Lopes on what sort of game I think we're going to get. You'll know right out of the gate. That's my first storyline. And my second one is just, it felt like New Mexico was able to have other guys come in and affect the game. Obviously, Jay Call was incredible. He's been all season. But, you had JT Rock coming in, pick and popping. And, he had no one within 15 feet of him. And maybe that was the plan to give him that shot. But he's not a guy who's averaging a lot, who's done a whole lot. He's been helpful off the bench, but he has one of his best games of the season. And it's like, okay, so we're not going to provide any resistance to him. Okay. Tanet comes in, obviously he gets the big, half court shot. But he came in and I thought he was like really useful and kind of switched things up and just he plays at such a different pace. It almost feels like Olin, he's like making the only exception he's ever made in his coaching career to like be like, I'm going to let you play a little bit and do your own thing. And he's kind of respected that. We talked about that a little bit earlier with Tanette. So I just think like not letting those other guys beat you like that, I just think can't happen. It's like, yeah, sure, Hall, that's a conversation for another day on the resistance they've got to provide there. But like, you just can't be letting some of those guys come in, especially with how experienced this team is. I get there, maybe don't have a ton of cohesion and they're working on that, but it's February. And so if you don't have some of that stuff figured out, I don't know if you're going to get it figured out. So not letting those other guys, for me, especially in a home game, I just don't think you can let those other guys come in and affect the game like the way they did, I thought, in that first game. And I thought it was a really important part of it. Obviously, Bouillon with the foul trouble, like Rock was really important and he looked really comfortable. And so I think that's kind of the other thing I'm keeping my eye on for this game is like, can GCU just not let that stuff happen with those other guys? And I'm not saying that disrespectfully to those other players. They're not good, whatever. I'm just saying like, not letting those other guys, have zero resistance when they come into the game, I think is kind of what I'm monitoring.
Yeah, and for me, I think that's going to be what makes or breaks the Lobos game is bench play. At home in conference play, they're averaging over 30 points a game off the bench, but on the road, they're somewhere around 20. That's a 15-point difference, right, that they're missing. And I think JT Rock kind of plateaued a couple games ago. He hasn't been getting the minutes or been as effective really since a couple of games after that GCU game. So really appreciate you breaking that down. Again, my guest today was Brennan Williams of Go Lopes Radio. Brennan, I will let you go, but I will leave you with the final question. Who are you picking to win this one, as both teams really need this victory?
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about just the moments in GCU season where they have answered the bell, right? Like they went up to Boise after the weird Colorado State loss. They went on the road and they kind of rallied the troops, right? It was like us against everybody when everyone was, I don't want to say checked out, but it was kind of a low point in the season. And so I'm kind of deciding like, okay, if you're New Mexico, do you have that same thing going right now? And is maybe getting out on the road good for them, right? Like, is that helpful to say, get out, stop sleeping in your bed and, get out on the road and get some different vibes going. And gosh, it's so tough, and then GCU coming off Saturday. To me, in my opinion, I think this is a GCU get back game. Everything I do, I don't do in a bias. I try to always state that. I think this is a GCU win Wednesday. I think they have a lot of things they can correct from game one with the Lobos. I have all the respect in the world for what Olin's been able to do, especially, getting out of, three freshmen, that have been a big part of what they do. Obviously Bouillon a little bit older, but the point still stands. They're a really well-oiled machine. And I do think though that GCU kind of has the get back. I think there's a little bit more tape on Jake Hall. Maybe they can do a little bit more to disrupt there. So I'll take the Lopes on Wednesday. I think if I had to, I think I would say the Lobos come out with a ton of energy and they throw that first punch, and I think they might be up. And then I think, GCU is going to be able to, just with it being a home game, kind of wear them down and eventually get the win. So that's my prediction. And I'm sure nobody will let me know if I'm wrong. I'm sure nobody will respond to me and everyone will be okay and we'll all be friends. So we'll see.
Yeah, no one will have issue.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, just tell everyone again where to find your work. It's been great all season long.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Yeah, you can just find me on X, the Everything app, if that's what we're calling it these days, at Go Lopes Radio. You can follow me there and there's links to kind of everything. I write via Substack. But if you just give Go Lopes Radio a Google, you'll find all my different stuff we got going on there. We're on YouTube. So we really incorporated the video component this year. It's gone super well. And yeah, so you can follow me there. We'll see what we have in store before the game Wednesday. We're kind of working on that plan right now, but there should be some stuff out there. But yeah, really looking forward to it. And thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
Right on. Thank you, sir. All right. I will wrap up the show here as we look forward to this game Wednesday night. Critical game of UNM at GCU. I want to thank everyone for tuning in and listening to the show, following along. I will be back with you on the next one. Thanks for tuning in to the Chair Heat Check.